Welcome back to Voice Global. I'm Pete Erickson, your host, and this next conversation is part of our Meet the Author series. In this case, I'm really excited to have this conversation. Joe Turow, who is the Robert Louis Shayon Professor of Media Systems and Industries at the Annenberg School for Communications at the University of Pennsylvania, is well steeped in the intersection of media, marketing, society, and his writings explore the power dynamics that shape culture materials through which people learn about the world. His new book out is called Voice Catchers, and it looks at how marketers listen in to exploit your feelings, your privacy, and your wallet. It is a really, really fascinating conversation. And you know, there's been so much going on right now with regards to privacy and advertising, and we can get into that as well. But first, let me welcome onto the stage Joe Turow. Joe, how you doing?
I'm well, and thank you for that nice introduction. I appreciate it.
In getting this interview set up, I did get to go and explore your background and see that this book is just one in a series of other books. Let me go and find, some of these other books that you have written here in the recent years. Looks like just in 2020. Media Today, Mass Communications in a Converging World, and The Aisles Have Eyes, How Retailers Track Your Shopping, Strip Your Privacy and Define Your Power. And then in 2011, looks like you published The Daily You, How the Advertising Industry is Defining Your Identity and Your World. I think we could keep going back, but it really looks like you've had your finger on the pulse of how new technologies do have an impact on us as consumers and as users and as individuals.
Yes, well, I try. Advertising has been fascinating to me all my life. When I was a kid, I wanted to be an advertising copywriter. Once my parents wanted me to be a lawyer, everybody expected I'd be a lawyer, but I found that kind of boring. When I was in middle school, I decided that wasn't for me. And I watched a lot of TV, so I figured I gotta, maybe somebody writes these commercials. So I started reading Ad Age when I was 17, and since then I've been hooked, one way or another.
That's great. So, you talk about reading Ad Age at the age of 17. Take us a little further back. Where'd you go to undergrad?
That was actually later. I went to Penn. I went to Penn all the way through. I got my BA in English, then I got a master's in communication and a PhD in communication at Penn. And then I taught for 10 years at Purdue in Indiana, West Lafayette, Indiana. And then I came back to Penn, and I've been there since.
Wow, that's great. A big fan of Purdue. I went to a wedding at Purdue one time, and I'll never.
That's a great school.
It's a great school. It's a great campus. It's really nice, and well, that's great. So you are a Penn alum, and you've come back, and you are now a distinguished professor there, and really kind of living at, like I said, the intersection of new technologies and how they impact our lives. Let's get into the book a little bit. The Voice Catchers, compelling title, certainly, and chapter 1. When I read it, I think you use this term, the rise of the seductive assistants. And I thought that was a compelling term. Tell us a little bit about, what does the term seductive assistant mean?
It actually, beyond that, seductive surveillance. The notion is that we have technologies all around us that are, in fact, quite seductive. Who cannot feel that Alexa's seductive until she gets you stupid answers, or right. Google Assistant, the various assistants in cars. People are buying homes now with assistants built into the walls. These are seductive, and the price is seductive too. You could buy on Prime Day 2 Echoes for $15 a piece.
Right.
So they are extremely seductive on many levels. At the same time that the companies that put them out try to play down the possible and even actual surveillance that takes place with respect to voice. And what I do in the book is talk about not only what's going on with voice, but really the possibilities and trajectory of voice today. It's not like it's a totally congealed industry. It's an emerging industry. All the books that I've written until now about this topic have been about industries that are in place. And I wanted to look at an industry that's emerging because in many ways, maybe we can do something more about it, as opposed to something that I can just say, hey, look what's going on, let's be scared. Now I can say, hey, let's look what's going on. Maybe we can do something to stop the worst parts of it.
Well, I'll tell you what, I think that it's such an important conversation to have. I mean, I always, you can always look at the motion picture industry, right? That they had to outpace regulation and set up the MPAA
Right.
to make sure that they could put a content management system in place that people could trust. And I do think as an industry, it's really important. It is. I'm heartened to see that there are multiple efforts in the voice tech industry with regards to advocacy and privacy and the topics, I think, that are really important. So I would give the industry some props for self-organizing around some of these topics. And certainly the topic of ethics and AI are front and center, regardless of the event that you go to in our industry. We call our industry the voice tech industry, but I think it's interesting you use this term, the voice intelligence industry.
Yes.
And almost, would you even see that as kind of a parallel industry to the voice tech industry?
Yes, it is.
Building everything.
Well, yeah, and I want to be clear. I'm not saying that voice technology per se is bad. And the kind of stuff you do, for example, the conferences that I've been at, one which was spectacular, doesn't really talk about what I'm talking about in the book so much. Development of AI when it comes to voice, natural language processing, for example, and a lot of stuff related to that is terrific. That's not what the book is about. The book is about the use of profiling of the voice in order to make inferences about us that then lead to certain kinds of discriminatory activities.
Right.
And where that's happening most right now, interestingly, is in an area people don't even think about, which is contact centers, call centers. But if you look at the patents that Amazon and Google and even Spotify have, and if you speak to people in the ad industry, as I've done, and if you speak to people in the auto industry and others related to that, you can see that the trajectory is far more related to profiling than most people would think.
Interesting. Yeah, and I think that there's this, I think there are a number of things happening. You mentioned the patents. If you look at all the patents about, recognizing, being able to make diagnostic analysis of our voice. There's so many things happening. There is there's kind of a health and wellness piece of this where there's, a bunch of, potentially life-saving benefits. But then on the flip side, you have the same technologies and the same capabilities flipping over to the marketing side that can be used in a completely different way. But at the core of it, like almost a lot of the same patents and a lot of the same technology would apply.
Well, the most famous one, you may know of this one where Amazon has an actual cartoon in its patent where a woman walks into her apartment and goes, Alexa, I'm hungry. Can you give me a recipe? And Alexa says, well, you look like you have a cold. Do you want some chicken soup?
Oh, yes.
And the woman says, no, thank you. And then Alexa says, well, I can get you some cough drops with an hour delivery. How would you like that? And she says, that's terrific.
Right.
Okay? Now, segue from that to the Halo. Okay. The Halo, for people in the audience who don't know it, is a Fitbit type device on your wrist that you can get from Amazon, costs under $100. And apart from all the exercise and sort of medicalized activities around that, what it will also do is listen to your voice, depending on who you speak to through the day, and it will tell you how you sound to your boss, to your wife, to your husband, to your friends, what emotions you articulate simply by the sound of your voice. And of course, what they say now is none of this is going to be shared with Amazon. But to me, it's a proof of concept.
Right.
Running right out of the kind of technology in the patent. And there are other patents that take off in that direction. I have a whole chapter which goes into the variety of patents and the ways in which they might be used. And so that's just the beginning of a, as I say, seductive surveillance. Gee, we can get cough drops for you in an hour. But what did it mean, you know?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. In the book, you also go into a scenario where somebody actually walks into a retail store and they're having a conversation with the clerk, and the clerk can actually wake up the assistant device in the store by saying a phrase that would seem perfectly natural, like "this would look great" or something like that. I can't remember what the exact phrase was, but then the assistant device is listening to the conversation, and they're actually gathering information on that customer in real time and helping the store clerk then make upsells. And you know, and the person in the store has no idea that basically their voice is becoming their profile.
And that is based on a patent. That's directly from a patent.
Right.
The thing is that people would say, well, you know, how could that possibly be? We don't give permission. It's going to be illegal. That's the seductive surveillance part. It's quite possible to get people to say this is fine, and to even give them loyalty points if they allow various stores to do this.
Right. I mean, it's all, look, the terms of service. How many of us have read the terms of use?
Nobody. We've done research on this stuff. Nobody reads it. And I ask my students every year, does anybody read it? Nobody's read these. You can't understand them if you read them.
Yeah. Right. I mean,
I read them as a matter of my work, but they're hilariously opaque.
I can't remember the band, but some band put, and our viewers will know, in their contract that you must furnish the band with only blue M&Ms. And they only did that because they wanted proof that somebody read their contract.
It's true. Yeah.
So, so I think what's interesting here is we really are at the precipice of this industry in terms of its growth. We've seen over the last 5 years since we've been really involved with voice and launched our conference and conference series, and we will be getting back to live events next year. We're looking forward to that. But I do believe that much of the conversation and a lot of these patents have been applied for well in advance of them actually being used.
Yes.
But a lot of the technologies that this industry has been working on, and the talented people are kind of across the spectrum, from conversational designers to developers to others and technology leaders, we are going to see kind of an explosion here of use cases. We're used to the idea of an assistant in our home. We're used to the idea of an assistant on our phone. We're used to the idea of an assistant in our cars. But I think we're just about on this precipice. I would love to get you to comment on that, Joe, and get your sense of, I feel like your book is just is letting people know sort of what's coming, using use cases that are actual. But where do you think we are in terms of like the evolution of voice in our daily lives?
I agree with people who say that voice is going to be the main communicative mode that people have with their devices. We're still in an era where people are used to touching their phones and typing, things of that sort. But I think give the next generation a bit of a chance. Everyone's going to use voice. It's going to be a combination of voice, maybe with cameras, and facial. But voice is going to be the dominant way in which people communicate to devices. It makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, and as artificial intelligence grows, if natural language processing is growing by leaps and bounds. I was just reading today about some new stuff that Google's been touting. It's incredible.
Yeah, they made some announcements in their keynote actually with regards to their Lambda and NLP, machine learning driven capabilities. You can now have a conversation with the planet of Pluto. I mean,
yes, exactly.
It's an interesting time. I think that if you look at some of the acquisitions as well, the Nuance acquisition by Microsoft.
Yes.
Certainly, I mean, their largest acquisition since LinkedIn. And
that surprised me, but it makes sense when you think about it, because Nuance is really B2B.
Right.
And so is Microsoft nowadays, more and more.
Yeah. I mean, it's all about how can we get people into the into the ecosystem, into the cloud ecosystem, certainly. So given that, what do you think in our audience, these are folks that are, well steeped in this industry. They are the pioneers, if you will. Is there anything that the industry should be paying attention to with regards to, getting ahead of any sort of regulatory challenges or anything, along those lines? Do you have any advice for industry leaders?
Leaders, yes. It'll be real interesting to see if the non-leaders do the same thing. To my mind, what we're really talking about, Pete, is biometrics.
Right.
And I think one of the great challenges in the next decade and so is going to be, what are the boundaries of biometrics in commercial life?
Right.
I'm more concerned about voice as biometrics, frankly, than I am facial, because people are worried about facial already. And
Right.
there, as you know, San Francisco and other places at least have banned it for government. Not that we shouldn't worry about facial, but
Right.
voice is seductive. We said it ourselves. People
Right.
use voice in the intimacies of their bedrooms and other places in the home.
Right.
And once you begin to say that your body is fair game for the commercialization of your thoughts, that's a problem. I mean, we could go through, and it's fascinating to think about the sort of ways in which people have been categorized since the 19th century. Moving from basic lists with addresses and names to demographics, to psychographics, to location, to behavior online and off, to the interconnection of online and off. And one of the points I try to make in the book is that every one of these categories, particularly when we get to the internet era was really interesting, because when we got to 1994 and the commercialization of the internet, advertisers thought they had finally solved John Wanamaker's dilemma. Do you remember John Wanamaker's dilemma?
Please remind me.
He was the guy supposedly who said, I know that half of my advertising works, but I don't know which half.
Oh, right.
Okay?
Right.
And so the notion was, now with the internet, we could solve that problem, because you could follow everybody, you know what everyone's doing.
Right.
You can baloney. I mean, we look back now on that, and it just isn't the case. We love to believe it, but look at all the issues that come up in terms of trying to understand what's happening online. You have ad blocking, you have click fraud, you have all these issues now with the third-party cookies. We have, people signing up with other people's names. And so what's happening is that at every step of the interpretation of people and the use of people for categories, there's a step back and say, hey, can we find a better way to do this? And it seems to me, and I think in talking with you, you used the term value added, that a lot of advertisers are beginning to see voice potentially as a value added to understanding about people. Because, I mean, it's incredible what some scientists say that you can learn from voice. I think emotion is the one that they're least prepared to say is definitive. But I've spoken to people who say age, health, weight, height. It's amazing what you can sort of eke out of a person's voice.
Right.
And that's the kind of thing which, if people run after that, I've been checking on privacy policies, for example. When I started writing it in 2019, I looked at Bank of America, which has Erica, the voice assistant.
Oh, yeah.
And I looked at the privacy policy. There was nothing in there about voice.
Wow.
So when I was finishing up the book in last fall, I figured I better go in and look at it again. And in fact, they had added voice. They have the right to use your voice now. Now, what they're going to do with it is different. Spotify got into trouble just about a month ago because they finally got their patent on using your voice to predict what kind of music you like.
Oh, interesting.
So it is it's like a siren to some companies that this is a value added that we ought to pursue. And people in the advertising industry resent that Amazon and Google have our voice prints. They're not quite sure what Amazon and Google do with it. And I'm not quite sure. It's very difficult to figure that out.
Right.
But they are preparing in the ad industry, the holding companies are trying to figure out ways in which to detect voice and to sort of merge themselves into Alexa and Google environments without getting hurt. So it's a really interesting environment that we're in.
Well, there's certainly, I mean, a big growth area we're going to see that's just getting started is interactive ads, where,
Yes.
we can hear an ad and then we can actually start interacting with that ad. And then we can have a whole interaction. We can do a transaction and then go back to the program that we were.
Which I think is terrific. But you know what I think is the what's going to happen, though, because based on what we've known about, the interaction in real time is going to start inferring things about us. And then track its relationship to our purchase history.
Sure.
And then talk about who our friends are and use those interconnections to make presumptions about what we want.
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, so much of that infrastructure is already in place. I mean, our advertisers know who our friends are. They know who we're connected to.
The social graph connected to the voice.
Right.
But go beyond this, because to my mind, marketing, and people say to me, it's just marketing. But the thing about marketing is it is a central part of society. We judge ourselves by how the market treats us. Yeah. Because discrimination gets, when you walk down an aisle, if you're in Target and you have the Target app on, and a Target knows that you just had a kid or infers it based upon your purchase, and they give you a discount, and somebody standing next to you looking at the diapers and saying, gee, how come I didn't get that discount? That's a big deal to people. Right. But then if you go, but there's another part of it, which is, I call it the hidden curriculum. It allows us to begin to think that the way to get along in the 21st century is to give up your data in this way. And think about, there are already issues, for example, down on the border with immigrants. Do you know that biometrics is a way that various countries keep track of people crossing borders? I can see a really use case where, let's say, a person is from Honduras. I'm making this up.
Sure.
And they say that they're not from Honduras. They're from a place where there's much more, say, Venezuela.
Right.
And the voice machine that they're talking into pretends or says that it can detect, because of their accent, where they're really from.
Right.
Or how much stress they're really under.
Right.
And do they deserve asylum because of that?
Right.
Okay. Or in a case where you have an authoritarian country, where not only what you say against the government is problematical, but how you say it and what that says about what you think based upon inference of your voice. So this stuff has implications far beyond marketing. Across the board.
Let's talk a little bit about some recent news, and that is Apple's terms of service change for iOS. I mean, I certainly have been getting the notifications about, not apps asking if I want to be tracked across applications. I'd like 90, I think 7 or 8% of the folks say no. I'd rather not have that. It's a pretty big deal just in terms of like how various applications can work together. What's your take on that? How does this fit into, the conversation we're having here?
I applaud Apple for doing it. I know why people say Apple has an easy way to do it, why they did it. Facebook is going crazy. I understand that too. If I were an executive for Facebook, I'd be angry as well. But from a public interest standpoint, I think Apple's doing the right thing. Now, the really interesting question will be, what will companies say? For example, Facebook is trying to figure out a rhetoric, I understand, about this. They have a right on their app when you go in to explain themselves, okay? They're not allowed to bribe us, which is really interesting. Apple has made that explicit. You cannot say, give us your data, we'll give you $1 a day or something like that. But they do have the right to rhetorically explain why they are using your data. And it will be really interesting to see how they try to justify that. Beyond that, I think that we're going to see companies trying to find other ways to reach people as a result of being blockaded from iOS with respect to knowing about the ones they want to reach. I mean, it's the same thing that we're seeing now with the third-party cookie implosion, supposedly. There are other ways that companies are coming up with, some of them even more abhorrent, frankly, than third-party cookies. But it's we're in a world where tracing the person has become the common language of marketing. That's not going to go away. Companies are going to just keep trying to do it. And in one way or another, they're going to try to bribe people to give them the data.
Right. Well,
to say okay.
You end the book on this chapter called Voice Profiling and Freedom. And I think it's a good segue because it's kind of where we are right now. Mm-hmm. But share with our viewers the gist of this chapter.
Okay. It works on a number of levels, some of which I've already suggested. But I think we have to realize that when we're talking about voice profiling, we really are talking about making assumptions, making inferences about our body. To what extent do we want companies to say, we know you better than you know yourself? Freedom is letting us look at your body, whether it's your voice, whether it's your face, you should excuse the impression, whether it's your urinalysis. I mean, how much can people give up about themselves in order to get what they think are good deals? See? So that's part of the issue. What does it mean to talk about freedom in an era where profiling is based on your body? And then spinning off on that, what can be done with the voice and with the face and other biometric facets of ourselves by governments, by political campaigns? Political campaigns are going to say, no matter what you do with marketers, shut them down. We have the right to say anything we want because of the First Amendment. Mm-hmm. So I can see very easily voice prints, or depending on the state, or at least the voice profile conclusions being part of your public record.
Right.
Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
And then companies coming up with using those inferences about you as part of the way to target you, or even in real time. Forget about names. I call you, and in real time, whether I know your name or not, I listen to your voice, and the commercial message changes based upon the inferences I'm making.
Right.
We don't know whether those inferences are accurate. And even if they're accurate, do you really want someone trying to do that about you where you really can't change it, where you really have supposedly little control over it, according at least to the scientists who deal with this stuff?
Sure. Well, it's no longer the Wild West in the voice tech industry. I think we know that era is behind us. Now is the time when a lot of the commercial applications are really hitting hard. And, the big brands out there, they do want to get to know us better, and they do want to make us offers, and they do want to have a tighter relationship with us if they can. It's going to be a fascinating time. Yes. And, this book, The Voice Catchers, really lays the land. It really lays out the landscape for the challenges that, that the industry is going to face. And that's everybody. That's those of us that build the technologies and the advertisers that are looking to improve the relationships with brands, or the healthcare provider that's looking to diagnose your ailment before Alzheimer's or pregnancy, or you name it, before you even know it yourself. It's a fascinating time to be alive. It's a fascinating time in this industry. Yes. And Joe, it's been fun to talk with you about this.
Same here.
For folks that are interested, I assume this book is available kind of across the
anywhere
board.
It's on Amazon. You could ask for it with your voice.
You can ask for it with your voice. Certainly, I picked mine up there, but also maybe at your local independent.
Your local independent bookstore would even be better.
Yes, absolutely. Joe, real quick, I was just, as we were talking, I was thinking, I gave a talk to in 2000 to a room full of C-level executives in the telecom industry about text messaging. I was working for a company that was kind of on the forefront of that. And I was telling them that in the not too distant future, people are not going to be talking. They're going to be texting with each other. And this room, this is when, we were still using T9 texting. It was kind of very clumsy, but man, they just thought I was full of it. They're like, why wouldn't you just make a phone call? Like, that doesn't make any sense. So, fast forward 10 years, everybody's texting, right? So for the last 10 years, everyone's been texting. What's interesting though, my kids who are 9 and 10, they don't text anymore. They talk their text. Yeah. So we're going back. It's like it's come full circle. Now we're going to start having conversations again.
It's funny.
And getting it asymmetrically, asynchronously through text messaging and then replying.
Yes.
It's a fascinating time to be alive.
Yes. Hopefully.
Well, thank you for your time. And I look forward to, we'll have another conversation in the fall to see how the industry is doing at Voice Summit. But for now, Joe, thanks for joining us here at Voice Global, and good luck with the book. Have a great summer, and we'll look forward to catching up with you.
It's my pleasure. Great talking with you. Great talking with you.
Thank you.
Bye.